That gap between the two is risk, and that risk is growing. And in my mind, the opportunities for private industry to help the military mitigate that risk are better now and will be better over the next 2 to 3 years than they have been in decades.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Future of GovCon. This is a weekly podcast to bring together experts from across the industry and look at what's happening today and how it's going to impact the future of our industry. I'm Jake Frazer. I'm the owner and CEO of Precision Talent Solutions. You know, in leading one of the industry's top executive search firms, I get to talk to influencers every day. C-suite executives, board members, growth leaders, top government officials, military flag officers. And on this podcast, what we're doing is we're bringing in these experts from AI, from space, from medical, from logistics, from engineering. And we're sitting down and talking about what's happening in their specific area of the industry and how it will impact the future. So pour a cup of coffee and let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Future of GovCon. Today we have with us a very knowledgeable and well-respected guest. Everyone I hear says Omar is a great guy. I found that to be true. We have Lieutenant General retired Omar Jones IV. I'm going to ask about that, by the way, because I to my kids. I'll let Omar introduce himself. But Omar obviously has had a great military career. His last assignment was as the IMCOM, the Installation Management Command commander, where he served for 3 years. Prior to that, he was a deputy for a year, but also a distinguished military career around the world. Just a great leader, a great American, and he has some really good insights to share with everybody about what to expect around contracting and the installations for the Army. So, Omar, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, Jake. It's good to see you. And I just want to thank you and the PTS team, both for the podcast, but really what you do across the board for folks, whether it's military or other aspects of our federal government as they transition and join our teammates in industry. You just have a great team there, and I've enjoyed working with you.
Awesome. Yeah, we've met a few months ago when you were just coming out,
Yep.
And you've done a remarkable job of building a nice portfolio of meaningful, impactful engagements. For everybody, Omar is one of our precision experts. So if you want to engage with him, reach out to us. He's at a lot of our events and part of our community. So really glad to have you. Are you up in Maryland right now, Omar?
I am. Ellicott City. So we're about halfway between Baltimore and D.C. Actually, my wife and I grew up here, went to high school together, and met when we were 15. So when I retired, there was really no question where we were going to go. We came right back to our hometown, and family's still here in the area.
A lot of retiring generals, the wife gets to pick the retiring location, but it sounds like you didn't have too long of a discussion about that, right?
No, it was an agreed decision. As a matter of fact, 3 or 4 assignments ago, I was up in the Pacific Northwest at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and I got the call that my next job was going to be in the Pentagon, and I picked up the phone and called my wife and said, "Sweetheart, let's go home." So we bought a house in our hometown. I did the D.C. commute for about 4 years. She stayed here when I was in Texas, but we always knew that, when the time came to take the uniform off, we were going to come right back here, and absolutely no regrets. It's good to be home.
That's awesome. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So, Omar, we want to talk a lot about the business of installation management for the Army and the other services. But before we do that, let's find out a little bit about Omar growing up as a kid. I gathered you were also an Army brat. Is that right?
Not at all, actually. I was the black sheep of the family because I didn't become an educator. My grandfather, my grandmother were both educators. As a matter of fact, my grandfather was a principal here when we only had one high school in our local county. My sisters are both educators. My mom's a retired teacher. My dad was a dentist, but his last job was teaching at a University of Maryland Dental School. So education and public service is absolutely in my family. But the military, I felt a call to serve. But I was the first one to spend a career in the military in my family.
Okay. I read where your dad was in the Army Dental Corps.
He was in the Army very briefly for about 4 years in the early 70s. But it was an opportunity for him to, pay back dental school. He made some great friends there, but it was 4 years, and then went and had a career in the private sector.
Hey, I grew up living on your installations. So as a kid,
Yes. Yes.
I'm a product of the Dodd school system. My mom was also a
Yep.
Dodd school teacher.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seemed to
Well,
work
my
out.
three sons are the same. They're all adults now, but same thing. Grew up on military installations, and you're somewhere between 12 and 15 moves each, depending on when they left the house to go to college.
So you're a West Point grad, right?
I
92.
am. I am.
Was that the best class ever at West Point?
Absolutely. There are a lot of great classes before, a lot of great classes after, but really the history of West Point is marked by class of 92, hands down.
Right. And you were the first captain, is that right?
I was.
Right.
So I had the privilege of being first captain, and they call first captain brigade commander for the Corps of Cadets my senior year, which was a phenomenal experience as a young 21, 22-year-old, and kind of working through leadership, and had just incredible experiences that year. And I think one of the funniest parts, though, is when that year is over, you're a second lieutenant just like everybody else, and that's a good reminder that humility matters.
You're off to a good start. What made you go to West Point? What was the what was the hook?
It was a combination. Um, didn't know what I wanted to do when I left high school. Needed to find a way to pay for college, and I did have this call to serve that I mentioned. The Naval Academy is about 30 minutes from where we live now, and I remember running a track meet. I ran track and cross country in high school and college, and I ran a track meet at the Naval Academy. And my now wife, then girlfriend, was there with me, and I remember walking around going, "This is incredible." So you can get an education here and get an opportunity to serve afterwards. And so I started pursuing to go to the Naval Academy and thought, I don't want to be in the Navy. And I literally went to my high school counselor and said, does the Army have a school like Annapolis? This is pre-internet days. And I've had a catalog for West Point, and I said, okay, I'm going to apply here. Got accepted, and never looked back. It was just I mean, there were clearly hard days, hard months, weeks, etc. But it was a perfect fit. But it was not a plan or not something I had thought about for years and years. It really was that come together of go to college, pay the bill, but also a desire for public service.
And so you're Omar Jones IV. So
Yep.
Did any of the kids carry the name forward?
We had a long debate. There's no fifth. We had a long debate. I have three sons, but when our oldest was born, Tracy and I really thought through what was the right approach. I've always enjoyed, being the fourth and feeling that connection to, my father, his father, etc. So what we did, we compromised. So our oldest son's middle name is Omar. But we didn't go to the fifth. We figured that way, at least keep the name in the family. But at some point, you do got to stop it. And it seems like once you go to fifth, it gets that really, really hard to stop. So we figured we would make that call. It does.
Yeah.
Very much does.
My son is a third. I was a junior.
Okay. There you go. Yeah.
He'll have to cross that bridge whenever he gets there.
Yeah.
So two of your boys wound up going to West Point. Is that right?
They did. So we have three sons. Our oldest is 29, a 28-year-old, and then a 23-year-old. The older two both went to West Point. The oldest one was class of 18. Our middle son is class of 20. Actually married one of his West Point classmates who is also class of 20. And then our youngest son is down at Virginia Tech as a business major down in Blacksburg, Virginia.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Someone had to break the mold. Good for him.
Yes, absolutely. Really did not have a desire to be in the Army, although it's interesting. He really wanted to go to West Point and realized it's kind of a package deal. And he said, you know what, I'm going to take a different path. I actually got recruited as a runner down to Virginia Tech, ran down there for 3 years on their track and cross country team. And it's just been, from every aspect, a perfect fit for him. He's excelled there, and just really proud of what he's doing down there. And so excited for graduation in May, and then he'll join the private sector, and we'll see how that goes for him.
So talk about your early years in the Army. What were some of the events that shaped your kind of perspective on leadership, on the military?
So a handful of things. So I had a real privilege during my first two assignments. I started out at Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne Division, and then when I was a captain, I went to Fort Hood with the 1st Cavalry Division. When I was a lieutenant, had a phenomenal battalion commander that many of your listeners will know, then Lieutenant Colonel Lloyd Austin, who eventually became the Secretary of Defense. My company commander was General Jim Mingus, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army right now. And so I had in those very formative days incredible leadership examples, but then also around me I had incredible non-commissioned officers. They taught me the role of being an officer. They taught me the impact of leadership. I have soldiers from my first platoon that I still stay in touch with just because we made that person-to-person contact. And that really put me on a path as a leader, realizing the most important thing you can do is invest in people and build a team. I went to Fort Hood, and like a lot of folks, I thought long and hard about transition from the Army when my obligation was finished. And I was doing some staff time, had a new colonel and a new major came in, new brigade commander and brigade executive officer came in. And within the first week, I realized that's why I'm in the Army. I want to serve with people like that. I want to lead the way they lead. They put people first and accomplish the mission, and never really looked back from that. Back in 1997, went from that brigade staff down to be a company commander as a captain. And my battalion commander was General Bob Brown. He was the president and CEO of Associates of the U.S. Army right now, retired as a four-star general. And he had played basketball at West Point under Mike Krzyzewski, and he led like a basketball coach. It was all about the team. How can everyone come together to work successfully together so that the sum of our parts is better than each individual. And that just left a tremendous impact on me for the rest of my career. So those two assignments absolutely impact my desire to continue to serve, my desire to build teams and to invest in people. And those philosophies really have informed my entire career.
How many years during your Army career did you live on a military installation?
I think the first time we lived on a military installation outside of schoolhouses was actually when I was a major and went to Fort Leavenworth. So out of 33 years in the Army, I think we probably lived on installations 20 out of 33.
Okay. So you had that end user experience, right?
We did. Absolutely. Yes. And we found it was interesting when it was just, Tracy and I, and we were just a young married couple, we enjoyed, we actually bought a small house in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and we enjoyed being homeowners and all of those things. But once we had kids, the call for the military community, the house, the school, the proximity to neighbors that had a similar perspective on the world, that brought us to the installations. And we were so glad. Just even today, some of our sons' best friends are people they met as young adults and children on military installations. And same thing for Tracy and I. So that unique military community, both in the States, but absolutely when you're assigned overseas, really provides in my mind, demonstrates the community value of what our installations do.
Was there a moment you can pick out when you were the end user living on installation, an experience you had, something that happened that later on when you became the commander of IMCOM just had a driving force on your priorities or what you're focused on?
I will. So my wife accuses me of being an absolute extreme optimist. So I hate to give you a negative example, but I'm going to give you a negative example. So we moved to Fort Leavenworth in 2003. I was going to Command and General Staff College. I was a brand new major, and we got there and we're going through kind of the assembly line to in-process the schoolhouse. And I got to the housing office, and wonderful gentleman there, and he gave me the keys to the house and said, "Sir, I just want you to know your house is condemned. We're going to demo it next year if we have money. If not, probably the year afterwards. So don't request any maintenance unless it's an emergency. Do whatever you want to do to the house, but just know that it's not in good straits." And it wasn't. It was clearly had been held together by just the bare minimum of maintenance for quite a few number of years. We had a wonderful community there. We had wonderful neighbors, but all their houses were the same. Fast forward from that, because those houses in Leavenworth were owned by the Army. Fast forward probably 5-6 years, and we were living at MacDill Air Force Base, and I was working for Central Command, and this was after housing was privatized. And the difference between having the government maintain and own those houses to having a privatized company come in, own the house, maintain the house, held accountable by the Army, which has always been a challenge, night and day. In every privatized home we lived in, where the balance between privatization and government oversight was done right, was fantastic. But that example at Leavenworth, I came back to multiple times to share the personal experience of why I thought privatization was the right answer for the military, and what would have happened in my assessment if the government had not privatized military housing starting back in 1996.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely see that.
Yeah.
I think that I like your point about also the community on the military
Yep.
installations. I remember as a kid, Halloween. I mean, everybody had a kid, right? It was
Absolutely.
in the stairwells in Heidelberg and PHV, and just the streets swarming with kids, and it was like just this feeling of like, we're all kind of in it together.
Absolutely. And I think to your point about Patrick Henry Village, and we lived in Vilsec, as I mentioned, for 5 years, on the other side of Nuremberg. There's something about the community overseas that is just special. You get the opportunity to go out and travel and see another part of the world and all the incredible advantages that come with that. But then you also get that American military community. One of my wife's favorite stories, when I was in Vilsec, at that point, the majority of the installation was the 2nd Cavalry Regiment. And that's where I did my major and lieutenant colonel time. I spent a year in Iraq from that installation, spent a year in Afghanistan from that installation. But when we left, all the soldiers left from the installation. And what was left was the families. And one of her favorite memories of the military were the bonds that those families made, where it was just the spouses and the kids for a year on the installation. And sometimes it was going ski trips together. Sometimes it was there just to support each other. But I think those are some of the strongest bonds that we've ever had in our lives.
So you had a career in command. It looks like you did all the right things. What did you do wrong, or what did you do right? They put you you had the NCR facilities first, and then they put you down at IMCOM command. Like, what was it about your skill set, or I'm thinking from a recruiting perspective? Why did they say Omar's our guy?
It's interesting because I wondered that myself. So, as I told the story about, moving to Maryland, 10 years ago, and the job I had in the Pentagon was Chief of Public Affairs, a job that I don't think anyone has ever sought out in the Army. But I did that for 2 years and I enjoyed it. I mean, we had the Army communicators, public affairs experts across the entire Army telling the story of the U.S. Army, the American people. I mean, how cool was that? I mean, that was just, that was wonderful. And I met a lot of folks in the press and realized that, they're not the enemy. They are professionals. They are dedicated to their craft, just like so many other professions that are out there. And I still have relationships with many of them. And I really enjoyed that experience together. But at that point in our lives, personally, so we had a house in our hometown. My youngest son, was halfway through high school and having a very successful academic and athletic career. I wasn't finished being in the Army. I still loved what I was doing. And so I thought long and hard about it and said, what jobs can I do here in the area? And I found the Military District of Washington. I didn't know what it was before that point, but the opportunity to command again, the opportunity to lead soldiers, have a mission that mattered, and do it in an area, the National Capital Region, that is so close to my heart. I'm probably the only person in the history of the Army that volunteered for it. I went to my leadership and said, if the Army wants me to be a major general, a 2-star general, and wants me to command at that level, this is the command I'd like to be considered for. And I was so happy when I got selected for it. It was an incredible job. I mean, it was tough. We had the pandemic. We had the riots in D.C. in July of 2020. I had everything associated with January 6th of 2021, the inauguration in January 21. But to do that in a place I was passionate for with an incredible team was so rewarding. And I enjoyed the 4 installations we had here in the area, Fort Belvoir, Fort Meade, Meyer Henderson Hall, and AP Hill. I enjoyed particularly helping those communities as they worked through the pandemic, which was so challenging for so many of us. And, when I got the call that I was going to go be the deputy at Installation Management Command at IMCOM, I kind of had that question. I said, ooh, did I do something wrong? And I talked to my mentors, and after they got done laughing at me, they said, no, this is when we look at your skills, when we look at your experience, we think you can help the Army best in this job. And in retrospect, it was a great fit. I love the job. I love being a deputy. I love being the commander. There's nothing the Army does that Installation Management Command doesn't touch in one way or another, and hopefully make better. So as a last assignment after 33 years, to be there where you're contributing to everything across the Army, across the world, it was incredible.
And what a transferable skill. I mean, it's a great, the commercial applicability, the business acumen you have to get in that kind of role. So let's talk about Installation Management Command. For those that don't know, IMCOM, I know you have a great pitch. It's more than just facilities. It's so much more. And so maybe for our guests, particularly those in the contracting community that may not think of training falling underneath IMCOM or welfare services and daycare and things like that. So maybe give an overview of what all IMCOM does.
Absolutely. So a bit of history matters. In 2002, the Army they centralized installation management, and they created one organization to run all 104 Army installations around the world. And the approach they took is each installation has a senior commander. He's a mayor. He or she's a mayor, but they also have another job. They command divisions, they command corps, etc. And the job of Installation Management Command, through its garrisons that are out there, is to support those senior commanders, support those mayors. And it is everything that happens with an Army installation. It is soldier and family programs, childcare, spouse employment, helping soldiers transition when it's time for them to leave the service, retire, all of those services. It's everything that deals with the infrastructure, utilities, housing, as we've talked about a little bit, airfields, motor pools, all of that to be able to keep the installations working. It is support to training and readiness. So it is all the ranges that happen on installations, from just soldiers going to shoot their rifles up to tanks and Bradleys and Apache helicopters and everything else to do their training. And then when it's time for soldiers to deploy, airfields, ports, all of that, Installation Management Command supports that. And then the last one that I know is probably of interest to many of your teammates that are out there is base operation services. And base operation services is everything from police and fire through custodial and groundskeeping and everything in between. There's 75 services that the Army has, and Installation Management Command and the garrisons deliver about 60 of those 75 to keep these cities running. And if you think about a Fort Bragg, a Fort Hood, a Lewis McChord, these aren't small cities. They are big cities, and they have the same municipal services as any other city in the world.
What is the biggest base? What's the biggest Army base?
I'm going to go out on a limb here because I don't have the stats in front of me, but I think Fort Bragg is by people, but Fort Hood is by space, by land. Fort Bliss, if you add in White Sands Missile Range and all that, is by far the biggest space, but it's 2 installations.
Yeah. And you talk about the training and the ranges. So like 7th ATC, like in Graf, would run the ranges, but you're responsible for like the maintenance of the ranges, or are you actually doing the training?
Not doing the training. And it's a little bit different in Germany because of 7th ATC and their responsibilities. But so I'll give you probably a stateside example, which is clear. If you go, any young lieutenant or anyone served before probably has memories of going to range control, range operations, to be able to sign for a range, get support on the range, etc. Those range operations personnel are part of the garrison. They're part of IMCOM. When it comes to repair the range, prepare a new range, whatever it happens to be, there's IMCOM personnel doing that as well. So the training is the unit's responsibility, but the actual range itself and maintaining it, making sure it's ready to support that unit, the garrisons, IMCOM does that to support them.
So that's like the more sophisticated base ops, right? Doing the ranges.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So they centralized 25 years ago, roughly, I guess, to standardize the experience, economies of scale. What about across the services? What about across the services? But there's a difference going on at Air Force Base versus an Army installation. What's interesting to watch is
both, really all three. So the Marines, the Navy, and the Air Force. I have watched over the past, really 5 to 6 years now, even back to my National Capital Region days, where the military department's approach to installation management is becoming more alike than different. The Air Force is wrestling right now how much they want to have in installation management versus their equivalent of a Corps of Engineers, and going through that. But the centralized approach is becoming more common across the services. Each will have its unique cultural differences just based on the differences among the services. But I think they're each finding the value of economy of scale. They're each finding value in having one voice to work with industry and have those conversations, particularly for global programs, and significant efforts like housing, utilities, etc. But to your point, General Jack Keane, who was the vice chief of staff when the Army centralized, he had a great quote when he was communicating that this wasn't about centralizing command. The Army likes to have command forward at the local level where possible. The senior commanders, as mayors I talked about. This is about business practices. And this was about eliminating what he called has and have-nots. Back in, to my example, Fort Leavenworth earlier, you could go to some installations and you felt like a have-not, based on that installation's approach to how it took care of its facilities, its housing, its infrastructure. You go to another installation and have a very, very different experience. So back in those days, 25 years ago, the Army wanted to make sure it was a common experience across all installations, as well as gaining the efficiencies and economy of scale.
Air Force bases sure are nice, though.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They tend to have the golf courses, right?
Yes, they have definitely nice golf courses. And, I've lived on both Hanscom Air Force Base and, as I mentioned, MacDill Air Force Base down in Tampa, and, quite nice. Yes.
Yeah. How did, talk about contracting within IMCOM? Do they generally tap into, do they use Corps of Engineers? Do they use GSA? Do they do their own local contracting? How does IMCOM approach contracting?
And while this is going to sound confusing, I think it is actually cleaner because of centralization, and hopefully helps industry know who to plug into, who has the acquisition authorities. And it really is 3 points where the IMCOM does its contracting. First is all non-appropriated funds. IMCOM manages about $3 to $4 billion in non-appropriated funds every year. That is money that's generated from morale, welfare, recreation programs, those kind of things, not taxpayer appropriated funds. But IMCOM has its own contracting office. And the IMCOM commander, back when that was my job, had acquisition authority over those contracts. So, the food service contract and child development centers and all those kind of contracts to support morale, welfare, recreation, acquisition authority is at IMCOM headquarters.
Globally.
If it is
that's global, even overseas, the IMCOM contracting. Okay.
Yep. It says run right there in San Antonio. Now, if it is a service contract, you think custodial, think any of those other base ops contracts are typically run through Military Installation Contracting Command. Its headquarters is right there in San Antonio, right across the street from IMCOM headquarters. So most service contracts are done through the MICC, has to have an acronym, but Military Installation Contracting Command, as part of Army Contracting Command. So for your teammates out there, they're looking for base ops services, those kind of things. Most of those requests for proposals are going to come out of the MICC. And then finally, anything that's dealing with infrastructure or utilities is contracted through the Corps of Engineers. Okay. Maybe the districts in some cases, but in almost every case, it's through the Corps of Engineers Huntsville Center, particularly when it comes to your energy service company teammates that are out there and those kind of things, exclusively done through the Huntsville Center. So those three are the primary acquisition authorities that IMCOM works with.
So your relationship with Corps of Engineers must have been integral, right? Like we're
very, very close.
Scott Spellman and his team very closely. Yes. Butch Graham.
Yep, all of them. We've had some wonderful chiefs of the Corps of Engineers, to include both Scott and Butch that you mentioned, but very, very close relationship with the Corps, because in so many ways, they would take our requirements with a small r, translate those into large requirements in the contracting community, and that's where it would come out as a request for proposal, and then they would work through reviewing proposals to make sure we were making the best choice for the government in terms of who was going to provide that service.
And what does the MICC, the MICC, I just learned a new acronym today. That's great. How do they engage industry? How do they find new vendors? How do they bring in new technologies? How are they doing their kind of innovation and industry engagement?
To some extent, they will do it locally, depending on what the request for proposal is. Is it just a custodial contract at Fort Hood? Is it a global contract, or is it regional, as the case may be? But that command works hand in glove with Installation Management Command, with IMCOM. Again, IMCOM generating the small R requirements, but the MICC translating that into requests for proposals that are out there. So the innovation, the opportunity to embrace technology, to get input from industry is going to be both together, because it may be a conversation that an industry partner has with IMCOM, and that informs the requirements to go to the MICC. Or it may be opportunities that are communicated in a proposal that goes to the MICC in response to an RFP. So it really is two points of entry, I guess, for industry there to be part of that base ops conversation.
And for our community here, give me an idea of budget under management or spend. So the Corps of Engineers is $92 billion. I mean, it's a big bill. How much does IMCOM manage? What's the budget there?
Approximately $14 billion in appropriated funds, and then that other 3 to 4 of non-appropriated funds each year.
Okay, not a small amount. Not a
small amount at all. No.
So let's talk about changes that are going on now. You just left the seat, and you probably are responsible for a lot of the changes that are happening. What are kind of the top 3 innovations or areas of focus that IMCOM's doing right now? New stuff.
I think new stuff. So to some of the industry teammates that are out there, this first one won't be new. But during my tenure, it's 4 years total with IMCOM, we really embraced technology and data analytics. And we found it was, when I got there was folders that would take actions and paperwork all around the headquarters every day. And it became very slow and very hard to see trends, to do analysis. So we really went on a 4-year journey to digitize the headquarters, to really embrace data analytics. We hired the first chief of technology, the first chief of data analytics for the command, and then leveraging tools to be able to see ourselves and see trends. But what I found, and I think this will get to what are the opportunities that are out there, we're bumping into a glass ceiling. To be able to get to the point where we were actually going to do predictive analytics, to do analytics that would provide potential future outcomes to inform decisions today, we really couldn't get there. We could see where we were today, we could see where we had been, and we could draw some assumptions out of that. But the idea of leveraging technology, whether it's machine learning, whether it's artificial intelligence, to take that data analytics to the next step, we were hitting a glass ceiling. And I've talked to a number of industry teammates that are out there that I think will be able to help IMCOM go beyond that glass ceiling. And I would assume, based on my interaction, that there are many other organizations across the executive branch that have that same challenge. The speed of technology so far outpaces the speed of government acquisition and government change that I think that glass ceiling is probably very common across many departments and agencies.
Seemed like a huge opportunity for companies.
Absolutely.
And I mean, how much money could you save if you could actually predict power utilization, water consumption, whatever?
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Great opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
So I will tell you, and I'm going to go back to a philosophical point, and this will get to where I think the opportunities are. Something I really learned, from the Military District of Washington and IMCOM was the relationship between requirements and resources. Particularly in the government sector, and I would assume in the private sector in many ways as well. Your requirements that are out there are always going to far, far surpass your resources. And what's the difference? The difference is risk. And I find a lot of times being able to identify that risk, either accept it knowingly and willingly, or mitigate it if you're not going to accept it. That's one of the hardest parts for leaders as we go forward. I have found that the requirements, this piece, it just keeps going up. It keeps going up because infrastructure is getting older. It keeps going up because the need for resilient installations is becoming more and more paramount across the board, whether it is resilient from utilities that could fail, or from adversary threats, or anything else that is out there. But the resources are remaining flat, and in some cases going down. The budgets are remaining flat, but the amount of government employees has gone down. IMCOM had a reduction of about 10% last year. So that gap between the two is risk. And that risk is growing. And in my mind, the opportunities for private industry to help the military mitigate that risk are better now and will be better over the next 2 to 3 years than they have been in decades.
Let's drill into that. Specific areas that industry should be looking at. Kind of, this is not greenfield, but it's an emerging new opportunity within the MCOM space.
Yep.
What kind of services should they be looking at offering right now? What kind of requirements do you see coming out?
Well, I'll start with the technology that we've talked about already. So I think machine learning, AI, data analytics, tremendous opportunities that are out there across the board. You use the example of control systems and metering. In so many places, when you look at particularly the older installations, their utility usage is estimated as opposed to metered and control the facility control systems, utility control systems, like it is through most aspects of the commercial community. So tremendous opportunity there. I think the opportunity for privatization is there. We've talked a little bit about privatization of housing. The military has privatized utilities, electric, water, wastewater on many installations. Lots of very active discussion over the past 6 months about privatizing unaccompanied housing, barracks in the Army, dormitories in the Air Force, because really the military has found, back to what I talked about at Fort Leavenworth, is that if we lease the land to a private company, that this is their core competency to run a housing community, maintain the house to standard, et cetera. They're going to do it very, very well. The trick, and something the military learned in 2019, is that to do privatization right, while the companies have the expertise, the government oversight is critical to that. But when you have both, it's incredible. But when you're missing one, you either get houses like Fort Leavenworth had 20 years ago without privatization, or you get a private company that's missing having the government advocate for its people who are living in those houses. Another one I'm a big fan of, are you familiar with ICSIS, Intergovernmental Service Agreements? So phenomenal opportunity out there that I'm hearing might expand even further in future defense authorization acts. But what it allows companies to do if they have a contract with another government agency. Think about maybe it is a local town, maybe it's a university, but as long as it's a government organization, then aside from the acquisition efforts, what the Army and the other services can do is sign an ICSA, sign an agreement with that local government, and that service provider not only supports the local government, but now supports on the installation. You have installations where it's been done for dog catchers, for example, pest control. So the same contract that's providing that service in the local community now does it on the installation, and it's a win-win for the local community, win-win for the military, and win-win for that service provider. There are regional agreements with some large universities where, again, they provide those services across the board. We have one in the middle of the country with an Army installation where the agreement is with the local school system. Local school system has a contractor that does small construction projects. And because of that ICSA, that contractor, that company can now do small projects on the installation, whether it's repair or minor new construction as well. So again, a win-win in many, many ways. But I see when I retired, we had about 180, 185 ICSAs across the Army. And I think the potential for exponential growth there is just a really high, because it gets service delivered on the installation much more quickly than a traditional contract.
Makes perfect sense. Why would you have two separate capabilities sitting right next to each other, right?
Yep. And I go back to my public affairs days, anything that ties the U.S. military to the local community
Yep.
is a win for everybody, because our military is America's military.
Yeah. IGSAs. That's a good one. Another
Yeah,
acronym. Great one.
Yeah, there you go. Hey guys, full acronyms today.
So we got a lot going on, changes now. So let's look to the future. A lot of our companies are involved in base ops. They're on Eagle task orders. They're doing. They're working with the Corps of Engineers, both CONUS and OCONUS. We have a shifting of priorities, kind of a refocus on domestic capabilities, homeland security with this administration. Lots of we have a lot of it's in 13 countries. We have installations. Is that right? 104.
It is. Yep. 39 states and 13 countries, at least Army installations.
So let's go forward 3 years. It's the beginning of 2029. What does IMCOM look like? What does our footprint look like? What are our priorities? We're way into AI by then. Talk a little bit about the future of this space, particularly as it pertains to the what industry will be doing.
Yeah. Well, first, I assume that the number of military installations we have today and where they are located in the country and the world will be pretty similar 3 years from now from what it is today. I mean, all the challenges that we went through as a military with the base realignment in the late 90s and early part of this century, I don't see that on the horizon. So if you start there and assume where installations are today, generally their size will be consistent, I think that's probably a good starting point. So then you look, the requirements are going to go up. And I talked about this a little bit, but we'll highlight those opportunities. First, resilience. And I'll talk about, security resilience is probably the easiest one to reinforce this example. So when you think about, in many ways, after September 11th, 2001, when we started securing the installations, it really was at the gates, and we made sure the gates were secured. When I left IMCOM, retired last year, we had really gone from security at the gates to what I would call multi-domain defense of our installations. When you think about all the threats that are out there, cyber threats, failed utilities, anything that would prevent an installation from protecting its community, but most importantly, the reason the installations exist, to project power, whether it is cyber or other effects that are going to happen around the world, or for forces to deploy and go out someplace else in the world. The installations can't support that unless they're resilient. So tremendous opportunities today that are going to keep growing for whether it's base ops providers, whether it is technology providers in terms of equipment and systems, et cetera, to help installations be resilient. So talk to
our installations become like smart cities, like Abu Dhabi is a smart city, right? Where everything is censored, everything is monitored. It's fascinating.
I've talked to a number of energy service companies about the need, when you think about the chain for electricity. You have to have resilient power production. You have to have resilient transmission. You probably need a microgrid to make sure that electricity gets to the most critical facilities on the installation. And that all has to be resilient across the board. So incredible opportunities that are out there in those areas. Services in general, again, everything from taking care of ranges and landscaping and custodial, everything that it takes to run base op services, which really are municipal services, with a flat budget and a decreased workforce. Those are great opportunities for base op companies out there to help fill those needs in a way that they can do efficiently. They can deliver an economy of scale and still deliver the services that are expected across the military. And then we talked about technology a good bit. I just see technology from control systems and meters to supporting organizations in the headquarters. All of that is an opportunity that I think is just an area that is ripe with opportunity for industry.
Yeah, it's we got a lot of legacy footprint out there. It's got to be upgraded. And you think about these smart cities, you think about how efficient they are and how everything is tracked and monitored. It just seems like that's the smarter way to do it. And that's a huge opportunity for companies to abandon kind of the reactive maintenance programs and work orders and getting more into reliability center maintenance and
absolutely
and getting ahead of the problem, which by now we should be able to do, right?
I agree. And there are companies, as you well know, this is what they do. This is what they do across the countries. They do across the world. They maintain buildings. They do all the control systems, et cetera, and they're really good at it. And so I think the opportunities for those companies to leverage their experience, their expertise with military partners, I think it is high today, and it's just going to keep growing going forward.
Fascinating. So give us, we'd like to get one word from our experts like you. Talk about your gut feeling about the future of this installation management arena going forward. What's the one word you would use to describe that?
I'm going to cheat and give you two words. From a government perspective, my one word is resilient. From an industry perspective, my one word is opportunity.
Great. We'll take that. We'll take two words.
Okay, fair. Thanks.
Yeah. That's great. Omar, I mean, we could talk for hours. First of all, thanks for everything you've done for so many families and soldiers throughout your career. And I know now you're embarking on a new era where you're going to continue to help, you continue to contribute. You're going to help companies get better with the perspective that you've gained over your career. So thanks for everything. Thanks for being on our podcast.
Yep. Thank you, Jake.
To have you here.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. And again, thank you and the PTS team for everything you do.
You bet.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussions with Omar Jones IV. He's a wealth of knowledge, a great guy, a well-known leader with a fantastic reputation. So if you want to engage with Omar, let us know. And I would say if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it with your friends, put it out there on social media, spread the word. We got some big brains here attacking some of the biggest problems that are happening inside government contracting and helping us look into the future. So we look forward to welcoming everybody back next week. We got a great episode coming up. It's a little bit different than normal. So make sure you tap in, come in next week. So Omar, thanks. Have a good day up there in Maryland, and we'll see you out there in the industry.
Sounds good, Jake. Appreciate it again. Thanks for the time. Thanks to you and your team.
All right. Goodbye, everybody. All right. So thanks for joining me on another episode of the Future of GovCon. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and some of the bold predictions. If you did, take a second, share it on your social media, subscribe on YouTube. If you have any ideas for future guests or topics you'd like to have covered, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always there. You can always learn more about precision talent solutions at pts.careers. Look forward to seeing you next week on our next episode.